Hey guys, Chris here, and I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today's November 28th, 2022. And let's get over the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? So, first things first, weather update in Ukraine. It is officially winter. You can see that in Donetsk and Kherson, the temperatures are approaching below zero during the evening, which can only mean bad news for the Russian army as they're poorly equipped. They don't have the supplies necessary to survive this winter, especially the mobilized men who had zero gear given to them for this winter war that is approaching or is already there. Second, is that the Russians will no longer be able to dig trenches or foxholes where they can hide in from artillery, but also sleep in, meaning that they will be much more open for, obviously to be hit by the Ukrainian artillery. And obviously, winter means that if they don't have the right supplies and tents and, places where they can sleep in, they'll have to make fires, and fires equals smoke equals you are going to be visible to your enemy, and so the Ukrainians will have obviously much more ability to find out where the Russians are through all these fires that the Russians are no doubt going to be making. So this is just going to be catastrophic for the Russian army. The next few months, we'll see, these daily updates that are given by the Ukrainian general staff of the Russian losses. I'm predicting at least three times more losses in terms of men. Whereas right now we're seeing about 200, 300 deaths per day on the Russian side. They could be very well be about 1,000 to 1,500 deaths per day on the Russian side. It's very highly possible that it reaches these amounts. And we'll have to see, but it's going to be catastrophic for the Russian army. There's no doubt about it. Thus, why the Russian military, the Russian regime is considering a second mobilization in early 2023. We'll see. So, following yesterday's video about Lukashenko and essentially Putin potentially deposing Lukashenko, now there's a breaking update indicating that Lukashenko has fired all his catering staff and his bodyguards. Why? Well, catering staff, he's probably thinking that he might get poisoned, be the next one poisoned, or be killed or deposed by one of his bodyguards, personal bodyguards. So I think that this indicates that Lukashenko has clear paranoia about being killed by Putin, and he's really aware that what Putin wants. And Putin, what he wants is that Lukashenko needs to give the order for the Belarus army to go and cross the Belarus-Ukrainian border in the north. He needs that in terms of keeping the Ukrainian military active in the north, and also to destabilize the Ukrainian army as well. But Lukashenko knows it's a suicide plan because obviously the Ukrainians have had months to prepare for an eventual second attack on the north, and they would probably get decimated within the first few days of crossing the Ukrainian border. So Lukashenko knows about this. And the other thing I wanted to discuss is that his foreign affairs minister, who was poisoned 2 or 3 days ago, I've heard unconfirmed reports that he was trying to broker a deal for Lukashenko and the West to give Lukashenko a way out of this situation, because right now everybody sees Lukashenko as Putin's ally. But Lukashenko understands very well that Russia is going to lose this war. Putin is going to meet a fate of death very, very soon, whether it be, from obviously his alleged sickness or just being deposed by his own people. It's going to happen. There's no doubt about it. Russia is going to lose this war. So Lukashenko is just trying to find a way that he can get out of this situation without Putin knowing. But Putin knows everything. He's corrupted the Belarus state from top to bottom, and he knew about this. And thus why I think that Putin, by killing the foreign affairs minister, sent a message to Lukashenko: don't even think about it. And so now he's in this very difficult situation where he either, whatever choice he takes, it's not going to end up well for him. That's for sure. And this is an interesting article. Just it shows you the audacity that some of the Russian people have and how entitled they feel, like they should be treated like refugees. They're not refugees. So the Russians fleeing Vladimir Putin's mobilization are not welcome in Latvia. So the interior, and this is an interview that was given to one of the Russians that fled recently, and he was given this interview to the Telegraph media, in some sort of old pub in Riga, the capital of Latvia. And so he was saying that the Interior Ministry of Latvia, which is in charge of security, pulls Russians in for these crazy interviews. They want to know whether I support Putin, whether I think Crimea should be Russian or Ukrainian, what the political affiliations of my family in Russia are. And, essentially just complaining that they're not welcome in the Western world. And I wonder why. You know, these are the people that should have stayed in Russia, in my humble opinion, and they should have fought for democracy in Russia if they really believed in it. Instead, they fled. They fled and did nothing about it. And by default, they support Putin because they did nothing about it. They don't even care about the future of their country. All they care about is just, living a good life somewhere else and then complaining that it's the West's fault for their situation. It's just, the audacity that these Russian people have is just astronomical. And I think they should express gratitude instead of complaining the fact that there were certain countries that allowed them to flee to, such as Latvia, Georgia, even Finland and Lithuania. A lot of these countries allowed these Russians, despite the risks that are associated with allowing so many Russians. Let's not forget that about 1 million Russians since September fled Russia. It's a massive security risk for any country, even admitting 100,000 people or even 10,000 people. Even if you have 5 of them that are pro-Russian that clearly have intentions of doing some bad things in your country, it can be disastrous. And so it just shows you the audacity that some of these Russian people have to even complain about this. So the oil cap could end Russia's economy. And so this is an interesting tweet by a fellow called Robin Brooksif. And I agree with him that a cap of $30 a barrel for oil would send Russia into financial crisis. Right now, it's being discussed by the G7. Should they impose embargo on oil prices or not? But the fact is that Russia right now is breaking even past $50 a barrel. So anything that is below $50 a barrel means that it costs them more to pump out this oil and to sell it, then they can make a profit out of it. So essentially anything below $50, they're not running a profit, thus they're losing money. And thus Putin cannot fund his war. Let's not forget that Russia is a resource economy. They export only resources, mainly oil, gas, rare earth metals, minerals. They don't innovate anywhere else, and this is how Putin can continue with his reign, is because he has so many resources. Russia is a massive country, and the world needs all of the Russian resources to obviously produce goods. And so right now, even cutting off the oil prices at less than $50 a barrel would really hurt the Russian economy and hurt Putin's ability to fund his war. So I don't know what the world is waiting for, but clearly there's certain countries that have a lot of interest at buying these discounted prices for oil. As you can see, oil prices have went down recently, obviously because there is a recession. The entire planet has massive inflation. Demand for goods is much smaller now, and thus the demand for oil is also going down. But it'll be interesting to see if somehow there will be an agreement to put some sort of oil cap for oil in Russia or the entire global supply of oil. So I have a few videos for you guys, and this one is, again, indication of this Russian lunacy that exists. I wouldn't be surprised if this was some sort of propaganda that was pushed onto this soldier that was exchanged. So this is a Russian soldier that was recently exchanged, and they gave him an interview. But again, you just have to see this video to understand. So he doesn't understand why Ukrainians are so angry at the Russian people. They're very, very angry there. It's a nightmare. They don't even want to talk about it. I don't understand why Ukrainian people are so angry. Right, because you killed hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. You forced the deportation of millions of Ukrainians across the entire world. You destroyed homes, infrastructure. Should I keep naming the rapes that you've been doing, the looting that you've been doing? The list goes on, trafficking children back to Russia, Ukrainian children that are orphans, most of them. The list goes on. So they can keep questioning themselves as to why, but we know the answers. I have to give credit to Julia Davis. So she's on Twitter and she watches the Russian news, so we don't have to. And so she's the source of all these videos that I might sometimes share with you guys of these Russian news discussing just, having just terrible conversations, genocidal conversations against Ukrainian people. And so she translates all of them. So huge thank you to Julia Davis for watching Russian news, because I wouldn't be able to. So this discussion is very interesting because one of these Russian guests is basically discussing how triumphant and how stronger Russia came out from this war. Let's hear what he has to say. For many, this war is a reason for despair, but if you look at from above, factually speaking, Russia is triumphantly fighting. Again, more than 1 billion people against more than 1 billion does the Western world, right? NATO. During this entire year, the Western world has been unable to counter Russia. Every average Russian citizen will agree with me. There is hot water, there is food, there are jobs, our transport is working, subways are running, salaries are being paid, our economy is being restructured. In reality, Russia is triumphant. There is no isolation of Russia, especially since China is joining Russia, from which some are trying to unbalance it. We also are joined by India, Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America. There's no isolation in Russia. We're triumphant in our massive special operation. They still can't call it a war at this point. Ridiculous. Now about the dialects. Apparently he's a philologist. This is an unpleasant thing to admit since we're discussing political topics. Ukrainian is a dialect of the Russian language. The Ukrainian language does not exist. There is just a Ukrainian dialect. There's no difference we audibly understand. 2 weeks should be enough to study this dialect. They don't even say that Ukrainian language is a language, it's a dialect, apparently. So this is the end of this video that I want to share, but one little comment about the Ukrainian language is that I've noticed this quite often when I spoke with Russians only in Ukrainian, is that many of them never understood or had difficulty understanding what I was trying to tell them. Even if Ukrainian and Russian, as he appears to say, are very close and super easy to understand, a lot of the Russians that I know from Russia had difficulty understanding me speaking to them in Ukrainian. And it's not the same case for Ukrainians, whether they speak Ukrainian or Russian. They understand each other. And Ukrainians that only speak Ukrainian have no problem understanding Russian language. I can tell that myself. I speak both Russian and Ukrainian, but I've met multiple Ukrainians that only speak Ukrainian. They don't really have an issue understanding Russia. Yes, there might be some words that might be difficult, but overall Ukrainians are very bilingual, and Russians usually have very, very, very a difficult time to understand Ukrainian language. So this whole speech about how easy it is to learn Ukrainian for Russians, good luck, because they have they don't understand Ukraine, to be honest, most of the Russian people. Last video, on a sad note, this is Mariupol, and you can see that the Russians are destroying all the destroyed, damaged buildings that they obviously annihilated during their campaign in Mariupol. And also it's a way for the Russians to cover all the atrocities that they've committed. They've been hitting all these buildings with thermobaric missiles, which are absolutely destructive weapons against civilian targets. And they've killed, as you've seen some of the videos I've shared with you, over 100,000 Ukrainian civilians in the city alone. It's a genocide of the Ukrainian people. And now the Russians are trying to cover it up by just demolishing everything that they've destroyed, and all the bodies that were left here, all the remains of the atrocities they've committed, they're trying to just completely wipe it off so nobody has a record of what happened there. But yet again, it shows the true face of Russia, which is barbarism at its highest level. A huge thank you guys for your support. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. Leave me a comment about, what you think about this video I shared with you of this Russian anchor or guest that was speaking about the Ukrainian language. And like my video if you like this video. So huge thank you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.